Okay, in this 9-mark question, we're having a look at a question on budgeting. And this is an example of a 9-mark question where you might be given some limited data in a table like the one on the screen there. So let's have a look at the stem to this question with the data and the description before we get into unpicking the demands of the 9-mark question. We're shown a table which shows actual and budgeted sales and costs and profit for a supermarket chain with 250 stores, and we're given the actual and budgeted information in millions of pounds for sales, costs and profit. And we're told that the business has decided to move to a new budgeting system where each store manager is set a budget for those three elements: sales, costs and therefore profit. And the 9-mark question is: analyse the possible consequences of the new budgeting system for the profits of the business. So, as always, we unpick the demands of the question, and hopefully it's fairly easy to see that this question is all about budgeting, and in particular this new budgeting system, and we have to try to consider the consequences of this for the profits of the business. That's the end point. Not always profits, but it often is. How many arguments do we need to provide to meet the demands of this question? Well, it's plural, isn't it? Because we're asked to analyse the possible consequences. 2 consequences, ideally. Don't need any more than 2. And in particular, it's this new system of budgeting. So that's the context here. And of course, the other context we're provided with, which we should make use of if we can, is the fact that it's a supermarket chain, and we're given some information in that table. So it's actually worth just going back to that table there. Let's go back to it. There is the information, and it might be worth pausing the video and just looking at that data to see whether you might be able to pick out some key features of the data, perhaps manipulate the data by doing a calculation, perhaps a variance to be able to use in your argument. I've had a go at doing that, so let's have a look at my response. And the first thing to do, of course, is to decide what points you're going to raise. We know we need two consequences, and of course those consequences could either be both positive for the profits of the business, or they could both be negative, or you could have one of each. So for example, profits might increase because store managers have got more incentive to control costs in order to achieve their profit budget. That might be one reason, one possible consequence. Another consequence is that profits might decrease if store managers are set budgets which they don't feel are achievable, perhaps which they feel are demotivating. And a third possible consequence, there are others of course, profits could increase because the sales budgets might give store managers a greater incentive to be entrepreneurial. Well, I've actually picked, I think, 2 positive reasons. This feels like a good move to me. I can argue hopefully 2 ways in which this new budgeting system could increase profits. So let's have a look at the first argument, and as always we use pecan, so we state our point up to that first full stop. Profits might increase because store managers have more incentive to control costs in order to achieve their profit budget. So it's going to basically argue better cost control, because clearly if costs fall, profits will benefit. And here's my argument. Let's read through it. What I've tried to do is try to draw on that information we were given in the table, because the examiner wouldn't give you that information if they didn't want you to use it, if you can. And also they told us about the fact the situation here was a supermarket chain, so I wanted to use some contextual application from a supermarket chain to help season my analysis. So let's read through it. Better control of costs looks like it is needed, since under the existing budget system, total cost variances were 40 million adverse, so costs were 25% more than budget. By delegating responsibility for achieving budgets to each store manager, around 250 more managers in the business now have an incentive to achieve their individual cost budget. A store manager is perhaps more likely to take ownership of their budget and take actions which help achieve favourable cost variances. For example, a store manager might decide to cut back on costs such as overnight staff to replenish the shelves if they feel it's not cost effective, or how many store cleaners are employed and what they are paid. By monitoring the detailed store costs each month against budget, a store manager will also be able to identify any adverse cost variances that can be actioned so that the profit budget is more likely to be achieved. So that's try to argue with some nice application there, drawing both from the table but also the situation that explains that actually this should result in better cost control. Ought to, shouldn't it? Therefore, profits will benefit. And as you can see, in the first part of the argument there, we've drawn from the table by doing a little calculation, the 40 million adverse, 25% more than the budget. But also we've drawn from the situation, 250 store managers now have a budget. And also we've got some such as seasoning in there, haven't we? So the store manager might decide to cut back on costs such as overnight staff to replenish the shelves. That's application that's rooting this response in the context of the question. So there's our argument, our first argument, but we know we need two. So here's my second one. And again, I've gone for a positive effect of the new budgeting system on profits. I've argued, or I'm going to argue here with the point explained, profits could increase because the sales budgets might give store managers a greater incentive to be intrapreneurial, which is part of the specification, of course. Now, I mean, what does that mean? Well, it basically means trying to make money, trying to generate sales, because you've got an incentive to do so. So drawing from the table again, although sales variances are already favourable, 30 million above budget, the new approach to budgeting may encourage store managers to explore even more ways to maximise sales in their stores so they can achieve a favourable revenue variance, which should make achieving a favourable profit variance more likely too. For example, they might run seasonal promotions in the store, such as Halloween themed events or special shopping events for older people. The store manager might offer spare shelf space to offer sales opportunities to local food producers in return for sales commissions to increase total store sales. A variety of entrepreneurial activities such as that throughout the year might make the store a more popular destination for shoppers, thereby increasing the number of people who use it for their weekly shop and thereby increasing sales and profits further. So there's another positive reason why this budgeting might create an incentive to drive sales forward and therefore drive profits forward. And as you can see, we've got two or three little bits of application in there. In fact, I could have highlighted that first bit, couldn't I? I should have done, drawing information from the table about how sales variances were 30 million favourable. So that's application 2. And then I've gone completely crazy with lots of these mad ideas, or maybe great ideas, about what you could do to generate local sales, such as the special shopping event for older people like me. Anyway, there we go. I think that argument works. I think the previous argument works. I think taken together, that response meets the demands of the question. Hopefully level 3. Pretty sure it is. Cheers.